Happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome to another Technique Tuesday. Today we are going to look at doing some different effects, kind of like a linen look is one example. And then I've got 3 different techniques on this, using some things that you'd find around your house. So that's where we're going to end up today. Of course, I've got my extra large earrings so that you guys can hopefully see what I'm working on. Before we do that, I want to start off with talking about why I always say you need to paint with the grain of the wood. I'm going to use an alcohol-based pen to show you why this is so important. So I've got a piece of wood here, and I've already looked, and I know the grain goes left to right, or right to left. It's this way. And I'm going to take my marker, and I'm going to show you what it looks like. Okay, can't get the lid off because I just put lotion on my hands. That's fabulous. Okay, so if I make a line going with the grain, look how the line stays nice and even and the edges stay smooth. But if I go against the grain, look what happens. The color bleeds either direction. So this is not only true with ink, but also paint can do the same thing. Now part of this is because you've got ridges. So if the grain's going this way, then the wood has ridges all the way up. And when I ran my marker down it, it's hitting all of those high points. You may not be able to see them, but it's hitting each one of them. When you're painting or using different pens, every time you hit that ridge, you can send little splatters of paint or ink everywhere. So not only does your color bleed more, but you're also flicking paint everywhere. So always try to paint with the grain. If you start off doing that, then it'll just become a habit and you won't even realize you're doing it. So a lot of times what I'll do is figure out which way my grain goes and then turn my item so that I can paint with the grain. Still using my doubled over piece of tape. Looks like I need a new work surface here. This one's kind of messy. But I'm going to tape my item down. And let's start off with this technique right here. Kind of gives it a little bit of a linen look. And what I used were just plain acrylic paint. So I painted a solid base, and then I used a deep denim blue, which actually is also this color, and I let that layer dry. If you're impatient like me, yes, you can use a heat gun. Make sure though you're staying away and you're constantly moving the heat around. One, you don't want the blowing from the gun to push your paint, and 2, you don't want to burn the paint. So stand back and keep it moving. You can also use a hairdryer. You don't have to use a heat tool, but hairdryer works, same thing. Just keep it moving. Then I used a lighter blue, and what I did was I painted that on top, and then very, very quickly I used my secret weapon. This happens to be, and you don't have to buy them this big. You don't have to buy this brand either. This is Scotch-Brite, and it's a heavy-duty scouring pad. Yep, kitchen aisle, cleaning aisle. I cut it into workable pieces, and then I used one of my little clamps and folded it over and gave myself a line to work with. And you can see this is the one I used for blue earlier, so I'm going to move that down a little bit. Clamp it. This just gives you something to hold on to. And then I ran it across while my light blue was still wet, and then I pulled it up as well. I know I went against the grain, but I went with the grain first and then pulled it against the grain. And that's how I achieved this look. I'll do it here on this blue one in just a moment. That's also how I achieved this top part right here. But this time I used a black base and then I used my blue on top of it. So before it dries on the top coat, you're going to gently, you're not trying to dig it across, you're not trying to scour it across, you're just trying to lightly rub it to give it that look. What you want are two colors that are similar but slightly different shades of it. So here I have a matte chalk, I think it's called Elephant. Yep, Elephant Gray. And what I want to put on top of it is a slightly different gray. And actually, I'm not going to use those. I take that back. I'm going to use this household paint that I have. It's a Flint Gray, and so it's got a little bit of shine to it. That way I've got different finishes and different shades. So I did already shake these. Make sure your lid's on tight and you hold your hand on the top when you're shaking. So let's put a little bit of this on here. And I mean, you don't need a whole lot. I'm just going to get my paintbrush a little bit wet and run it across. Woo, that was way too much. It's running all down the sides of the edges. Not what you should do, but that's all right. I'll go back and paint the edges gray. Make it look like I planned it that way. Now on your earrings, since they're a much smaller size, you can probably get away with 2 strokes across and your whole earring will be covered. So before this dries, I'm going to take my scour pad and run it across as evenly as I can. Give it just a moment. Wipe that off and then run it up as well. Again, when your earrings, 1, you want to make sure it's taped down so it doesn't move on you, and 2, based on the size of how you cut your scour pads, you can usually just do it in one pass. If you need to go back and grab part of it, try to do your lines as straight as possible, not like my crooked one there. So now you can see we're starting to get that linen look to it. So if you had like a white base and a cream top coat, that'd be a pretty combination as well. Okay, so that's one item I had laying around the house. The other, if you don't have it around the house, certainly you can run to the store. These are just little rubber, they were called printing tools, but they're just little rubber scrapers. And you may have some bigger ones laying around the house if you've ever done any like grout tile home improvement. So let me show you what that looks like. That's this part right here. So again, put my base coat underneath. I'm just going to keep going on this one. Take my tool while it's still wet, and you're just going to gently, as evenly as you can, drag that across. If you like just the lines that way, leave it like that. If you want to go back and do the crosshatch, do that too. If you want to switch to a different shape, there's no rules here. You can do whatever you want. See how I ended up with like a totally different pattern there? Alright, next one. The good old toothbrush. This is what I used to achieve this look down here. Now I will say down here I actually used 3 colors. I had my base was black, then I had my blue, and then I had this fairy tale blue that gives it kind of a purpley undertones. So you don't have to go finding all different colors if you don't want to. You can just stick with 2 and that works just fine. So I'm going to use, let's use the lighter gray here. Just again, we don't need a whole lot of paint. And normally you wouldn't do 3 different techniques on one earring like I'm doing here, but this is my world. I'm going to take my toothbrush And this one I'm going to turn it so that I can scrape across. If you didn't scrape off enough, if you want to see more of the color underneath, just keep going. But wipe off your brush each time you do it. That way you're not taking it off and putting more back on at the same time. Again, go with the grain. Just wanting some more of that dark to show through. There. I like that. Hope y'all can see that. So there's 3 different techniques just using stuff that you have laying around the house. Hope you enjoyed our Technique Tuesday today, and we will see you next week.